Hello everyone, happy to be here.
Hi.
I'm Owen, my colleague Min. So today we're going to be talking about how AppDynamics can help you for all your cloud use cases. So let me start with the context. As we saw in the keynote this morning, as the customer experience gets ever more intuitive and elegant, the technology fabric behind the scenes gets more and more complex. I remember from on-prem to VMs to clouds to serverless to the onslaught of technologies coming with DevOps. That's really complex. Also, when people think of cloud, some of them at least, might think of kind of a dreamland. I'm going to go there, I'm going to provision within few keystrokes, I'm going to get my systems up and running, and it's going to be fantastic. But as most of you know, in real life, it looks more like this. When you go into the cloud, you've got a big puzzles of services you need to know, configure, put in place, and then being able to use. Above that, when we talk about clouds, we're really talking about multi-clouds most of the time. So from recent surveys, as you can see, 84% of people surveyed are going multi-cloud. And the vast majority of these are going hybrid. So it means that in most customers we discuss with today, it's all about multi-clouds, meaning one or multiple private clouds, one or multiple public clouds. So that gets a compounding complexity. So what happens when you've got a problem? That's when it gets very hairy. So the summary of that intro is, as more and more of the business becomes digital, as the customer experience expectations become easier, more intuitive, with higher demands than ever, and as the technology complexity goes up the roof, APM and AppDynamics, end-to-end, high-level, top-down visibility is more important than ever. So let's have a closer look at some of the challenges. First, show of hands, quick questions. Who believe cloud monitoring is easier than traditional monitoring? No one. Good. I'm not entirely surprised. I was expecting few hands. So most of you are aware of this one, right? The age-old war rooms, tens of people in most companies, can go up to hundreds in larger companies, all working hard for MTTI, but this time it's usually not mean time to identification, it becomes mean time to innocence. Not me, all my indicators are fine, they're all green, must be the network. Oh, not the network, so all my indicators are green, must be the database, so on and so forth. And as you may know, the same kind of approach happens in business war room. They use all the tools, look at it from the other angle, which is, well, we see that something's going wrong, but we don't know why. Okay? So there must be a better way. So when it comes to finding the needle in the haystack, you have traditional siloed monitoring tools, looking at one technology at a time. That's what we'll be discussing and how we're different. So they might work when you have a single big problem, a server going down, a database blowing up. They're going to see it, you're going to fix it. But in fact, in real life, most of the problems come from a domino effect. What if you have a slowdown in your Kafka queue impacting a downstream application? What if you have a problem with a third-party authentication service that's impacting your applications? So you're going to have loads of tiny problems that accumulate in the domino effect, and then you're left in the dark. So what you need is really a high-level, top-down, end-to-end view, going through your matches queues, orchestration layers, all the rest. So let's have a look at some of the tools many of you, I guess, use. So here I'm talking about AWS CloudWatch, X-Ray, Microsoft App Insight, or the Google Stack Driver. Don't get me wrong, they are great, they do a good job, but what about the upstream and downstream, okay? I know exactly what's happening in that slice of my technology, but who called me? So who am I impacting when things go wrong? What happens after me? Who are the customers? What about the business? So my summary of discussions when I discuss with those guys say, hey, you know and love APM since you're here. So usually it's about breaking silos. What are you guys doing right here? You're creating new silos. We believe you need to use APM in that context, right? Makes sense to most of you, I guess? And we are not the only one to believe so. So that's a quote from Gartner, which basically says the vast majority of companies are leaving big money on the table when it comes to cloud. Why? Because they don't have that holistic monitoring we're talking about with AppDynamics. okay? It's not about I'm having that piece in the cloud, I need to know everything about the piece. No, you need to have a bigger context. And basically today, the goal of the session is that you're not one of them leaving money on the table when going into the cloud. So let's move on to the solution. Surprise, surprise, we can help you. That's why we're having the session, right? So most of you might know that, but for prospects, I guess you've heard of BTs, business transactions. So my quick summary, transaction tracing from the front end, whether that's human-driven action on a web page, mobile app, or machine-generated action. We trace it back, all the calls, all the technical hoops, all the way down to your backends, on-prem in the clouds, multiple ones, and all the way back. So we have that single stitch, that single execution trace. Doing the full round trip, we measure how long it takes, and that's the closest you can get to the delivered user experience. Okay? What's nice with that, it's a nice abstraction level. Okay? So as the complexity grows, you have thousands of microservices left and right, some serverless popping up, some database and queues, and you name it. The BT, the business transactions, make complex easier. You're looking at a way simpler entity. That focus on what matters, since that's the closest to the user experience. Second good benefits of BTs is as your application change, software application architecture change a lot, especially when you move to the cloud, right? Monolithic, lift and shift, or re-architecture, just try and put some microservices, then I put it on, then I move some parts to serverless, etc. So the architecture, the physical infrastructure, the virtual one, and the software architecture can change a ton. But even in those contexts, the BTs don't change that much, or even don't change at all. So that's an island of stability in that complex, evolving world. Make sense so far? Okay, going through quickly, because I want to leave as much time as possible for me and for the demo. That's the real thing. It's the star of the show. First part, the flow map. Talking to prospect mainly. All others, I'm sure you know that by heart. What's the magic? You deploy the agents, they start collecting information, that information bubble up in what we call the controller, and boom, by magic, we reverse engineer a true dependency map of all your applications. We see all the bits and pieces where they execute, how they're interconnected, how they behave. Step one. Also, at the same time, we start baselining. So we collect it. We learn what normals look like through machine learning. Why is that useful? Just to generate less and more meaningful alarms. Let me give you a very basic example. Every Friday morning, you've got a batch job running, which slows down a tiny bit your transactions. Doesn't impact customer, doesn't impact the business. Other tools with static thresholds would generate alarms. We don't. Why bothering you? It's business as usual. Nothing to be aware of. Second part, when we talk about APM, I meet many people who say, yeah, it's all about the application, because the name APM, I got it. It's Application Performance Management or Application Performance Monitoring. It's all about the app. And today's focus of the session is to show you that it's more than the application. So for the ones using AppD already, you know about the machine agents, right? For your traditional, more on-prem deployments or others, it gives you deeper view into what's happening. So AppDynamics is all about having that high-level end-to-end view, top-down monitoring. But when there are problems and other use cases, you need to go deeper down to understand why that's happening, where it's happening in detail, right? And we believe you need the same deep dive down capabilities in the cloud. And that's the focus of that session. So this is some of the technology we support. Let's move on quickly. The first one I'd like to mention is AWS Lambda. Who uses Lambda in the room? Like 10, 12 hands? Okay, good. Not surprised. So even though it's red hot, it's pretty recent technology, right? It was released back in November 2014. And my quick summary is it's an event-driven serverless computing platform. In other words, it's developer's dream, right? I write my code, I put it there. All I have to say is, when this event occurs, trigger my code. When my code is done, put the result there, done. It scales automatically, up and down, auto heals, auto whatever, okay? So if we come back to the story, remember many years ago, when developers didn't have clouds at all, access, weeks to provision the servers, add days or even weeks to set it up all together, and then you can use it in a month or so. Didn't like it. Cloud came, cool, a few keystrokes, I can provision all the stuff I need in cloud, infrastructure as a service. Yeah, but I still need to configure and set up all the stuff. And the stacks move up. Platform as a service, backend as a service, and now with serverless, well, what most people call function as a service, FaaS. Okay, so that's really developer's dream, and that's why it's taking off big time. The problem is, you have some observability built in by Amazon and others, right? Microsoft have their own equivalent, Google have their own. They do provide some observability or monitoring tools. But once again, it's a silo tool. They only look at that piece of the code. So they do see what's happening within Lambda, completely blind to what's before upstream and downstream. So we developed an agent that looks and behaves like any other AppDynamics agents. So by using AppD Lambda agent, right, you get the full flow map, you get the analytics, you get everything you know and love about AppD. Still with me so far? Let's go down. Kubernetes. Curious to see, who's using Kubernetes? Who's using Kubernetes in production? Less hands, but quite a lot still. Okay. I will not spend too much time on this one because that's going to be the demo from Min. I don't want to steal the thunder. What I'd like to mention is Kubernetes is great, all about orchestrating containers, spinning them, killing them, managing all the stuff. The drawback is that it's kind of a black box, right? So when something goes wrong, you need to know which decisions were made by Kubernetes, what happens, which images, do I have problems with my images, how did it scale up and down? So we're going to show how we have visibility to that. Next one down, for the ones not using Kubernetes, going plain Docker. Anyone in the room just using Docker without Kubernetes? Okay, one hand. I'm going to go super quick, sorry. Even if you don't use Kubernetes, we have visibility to the Docker layer. So in the Kubernetes context, we have full visibility of the Kubernetes clusters, the pods, etc., plus the Docker images, obviously, running inside. When it's Docker only, we do have visibility through the machine agents. So we get you covered in that case. Last slide for me, infrastructure. So going even down. If you're wondering about your running instances, how they behave, whether that's compute, storage, we do have visibility to these two. And some customers use such information together with the costs, the pricing info, and they come up with spends dashboards for their cloud deployments, which is a concern. Okay, so I'm enough of the high-level slides. Now I'm going to hand over to Min for the real part of the show. Floor is yours, Min.
Thanks, Erwan. So my name's Min Chowdhury, and I'm a solutions engineer here at AppDynamics. And I've worked with hundreds of our customers to help them deploy their monitoring strategies and implement their strategies. So in today's demo, we're going to look at the the AppDynamics cluster agent. But before we jump into that, I just want to give you a bit of an understanding of how it works. So the demo is going to be broken down into two parts. And the first part, we're going to look at how the cluster agent instruments your cluster and the pods and containers underneath. In the second part, we'll move on to show you how we can get down to the visibility underneath. So it's time to look at the supporting kind of cloud services and infrastructure to give you that full picture. But let's just jump into how the agent works first. So the agent itself leverages the Kubernetes controller and creates an AppDynamics operator. Now what this AppDynamics operator does, its job is to open up the door for the cluster agent and has the necessary kind of privileges so that the cluster agent can collect the data that it needs. The cluster agent then goes and instruments the cluster and the pods and containers underneath, and it can automatically inject APM when it needs to. So why would you use the AppDynamics cluster agent? Well, firstly, it's actually written in Golang, so it's the native Kubernetes language, which means there's no Docker dependency. Secondly, it doesn't require any root access, so using the AppDynamics operator, it's super simple and easy to get it out and deployed. And finally, don't just take our word for it. We're actually Red Hat certified and available on the OpenShift catalog. So the premise of our demonstration today is that we have an application that we've moved over to OpenShift. So it's a client API. And since moving it over, we've had nothing but complaints. So we're getting reports of constant errors. So we're actually going to do a live installation today of the AppDynamics cluster agent. And then we're actually going to then deploy a very basic Java application to demonstrate how the cluster agent can inject an application with APM and analytics on the fly. Cool. Can we just switch over to the demo, please? Excellent, right. So I'm going to kick off by showing you the controller that we'll be using today. So as you can see, there's currently no applications. It's a nice blank controller, and once we've got our agent deployed, it'll come back onto this. So I'm now just going to jump over to the command line, and I've actually got the OpenShift console open here, and I just want to show you what we're running. So I'm just going to run some OpenShift commands, and what we can see is we have our client API down at the bottom here. So as I've explained, since we've migrated this over to OpenShift, we've had nothing but complaints. So what we're going to do is we're going to actually install the cluster agent now. So I'm just going to clear the screen. And I'm going to jump over to our AppDynamics namespace. So here we are onto the AppDynamics project space. Now, I've already deployed the AppDynamics operator, which is super, super simple and easy. It takes a couple of minutes. And I've downloaded the agent from our GitHub repository, so it's all ready to go. Now, there's not a lot of changes that I need to do. I just need to go into the spec file for the agent itself and add in the controller URL. So really nice and easy. Just open up that YAML file. And you can see here that the controller URL is currently missing. So I'm just going to jump across to my controller, grab that URL. And pop that in. So if you can see there, I'll zoom back in. We've now added that URL in. Now I'm just going to write that file. And there we are. So just clear the screen. So it really is as simple as that. So all I've done is just added in that controller URL. And now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to clear that screen, and I'm going to deploy the agent. I'll just zoom in further. So just point it to that file that I've edited, hit that up, and that cluster agent is now created. So it really is as simple as that. We'll just give it a couple of seconds for it to come up, and then I'll show you how that's running. So you can see at the bottom there, our cluster agent has now come up. So really, really easy to get that up and running, and really quick. And you can see the AppDynamics operator that I mentioned earlier. Now, I also mentioned that I'm going to deploy a Java application, a really super basic Java application. And the whole point of us doing that is to show you how the agent will dynamically instrument it with both APM and analytics. So to do that, I'm actually going to jump into my development namespace. And I'm just going to change directory here. And again, I'm just going to run a create command. And then we'll just give that a few seconds to run and get running. So like I said, once it's up and running, the agent should pick that up, have a look at it, and then put in APM and analytics. So we'll just give that a second. And we can see at the bottom here, our new Java app is up and running. So what we're going to do now is we're just going to give it a few minutes for the agent to start collecting metrics, dial into the controller, and for the controller to come to life. And in the meantime, I'm just going to hand back to Owen for a few minutes. Thank you.
Thank you. Now my role is to buy time for Min to get data to show you, okay? So when you go on the OpenShift website and you look into their certified environments, you're going to find AppDynamics with all the steps and procedure to install. Basically what Min just showed us a few minutes ago. So as a summary of the app, simple application. He instrumented the part, as you can see, was super basic, quick and easy. And the next step will be about visibility. So to buy even more time, we're going to explain how it works and what we do. So what does it do? Today it supports Java, .NET Core, and our analytics. And the way it works is, as you've seen, we've got an operator with special rights that deploys the cluster agents. And when that cluster agent kicks in, it does two things. Do you have APM in your app? Yes, no. If yes, I don't do anything. If no, I inject the agents on the fly. So even though we recommend you include the APM agents as part of your images in your CI/CD pipeline, if you haven't done that for a new project or the guys just knew something, it's not done yet, we get you covered. It's completely automatic, as you're going to see in a minute. Now, the second part here is sidecar analytics. So that's a construct usually used for logs, to collect the information for logs. So we're using the same native mechanism for analytics data to flow out, back, consolidate, so that you can slice and dice as much as you'd like. So Min, did you have enough time? Can I give it back to you?
You can, thank you.
Okay. Let's come back to the laptop.
Thanks, Owen. Great. So jumping back onto our controller now, we can see we've got 3 applications up. So we've got our K8 cluster agent, our client API that we're having problems with, and my first app. So that's the Java application that I deployed. So I'm going to jump into the cluster agent for a second, and you can see that as we explained, it is written in Golang. So we've got visibility there. Now the cluster agent itself just uses the reuse name option. So again, nice and easy to get it up and running. And in fact, we can actually go and have a look and see what the agent itself is up to. So we've got a whole bunch of business transactions there, as Erwan touched on earlier, so we can see what the agent itself is up to. Now what we're going to do is we're actually going to go and take a look at our client API and see what those errors were and try and get down to root cause. Now when I open it up, I'm presented with the flow map. So just to make the point here that Kubernetes or not, we don't see it as any different. You still get the same great APM that you're used to with AppDynamics. So like I explained, we've had nothing but reports of errors with this new application. So if I just quickly open up the window here, I can see on our transaction scorecard that we've got 100% errors. So not great. So I'm just going to jump into the transaction snapshots and try and get down to root cause. So each of these rows here is an individual transaction that our users have gone through. So to open that up, I'm now inside of the transaction. So I've opened that exact transaction up, and we can see exactly what was going on here. So we can see that actually the user ended up getting an error, so really not good. So I'm going to do a drill down now to try and figure out what the root cause was. So what we're presented with now is what we call the call graph. So here it's a stack trace of all of the methods that were executed on that first node to service our user's request. We have class name, method name, line number, so we're very, very specific. I can see how long those methods took to execute and whether they made any kind of exit calls on. So I can see right at the bottom here we had this make web request, and it made a couple of HTTP calls out, which both resulted in errors. Hence, they're both red. So I'm going to jump into our errors tab here and have a look at what happened. So I can see actually that there was a couple of Java unknown host exceptions that were thrown. So we're down to root cause now, and we just wanted to demonstrate that, again, regardless of whether it's the Kubernetes agent, the Java agent, the .NET agent, it's business as usual for us when it comes to APM with the Kubernetes cluster agent. So I mentioned in the second part of the demo, I'm going to delve deeper into Kubernetes. So, as Erwan touched on earlier, Kubernetes, a lot of it's automated and it's almost seen as a black box. So we want to give you visibility into that black box and open it up and see what's happening. So what our cluster agent does is it actually creates this dashboard as part of its deployment. And this dashboard now is really opening up the lid of Kubernetes and giving us that visibility into the black box. So starting from the top here, we can start to see things like the capacity. So how much CPU you're using, how much memory, how many pods you're using. We can then kind of delve to the next row down, and we can start to give you the health of the pods. So the pods facing any issues, are they restarting, are there any errors? The image issues, if they're pulling an image down, are they facing any issues doing that? And then, a bit more of a deep dive into the pods itself, how many are running, if there's been any scale downs. And then we move on to the kind of the infrastructure side of things. So again, CPU, memory utilization, real understanding there of what's going on. But the favorite for me on this dashboard really is at the bottom here. So the bottom is basically a heat map. So each of these kind of squares is a pod that's running, and they're grouped together by their namespace. And the key, which if I just zoom in, you can see here the key running up the top here gives us an indication of their health. So if, for example, I hover over this one here, I can see that these are actually the cube system pods. And then when I hover over, I get more stats of CPU and memory. If I move actually along to what we have here, so these two in the middle, these are our applications that we've instrumented on the fly. So what we have here is our client's API. So we can see it's quite high on the memory usage. And then what we have here is the new Java application that I've deployed. And worth mentioning that the number 2 here is denoting that we've got the actual application instrumented with APM, but then as Owen mentioned with Sidecar, we've got the analytics agent there as well. So it's got both of those. So this dashboard really gives you that deep dive view into the Kubernetes environment just to understand the kind of underlying infrastructure that's supporting your application and gives you that visibility. I think that's really, really crucial. Now, the dashboard itself is actionable, so I can actually click through, and what I'll get through to is analytics. So this will now come up with a pre-populated analytics query for me, so I can start to see all of the pods that are currently running. So we'll just give that a second. And again, really nice and easy. So from this view here, I've got loads of information, so I can really understand what's happening in my pod. So I can understand, for example, the service account that's deployed it, the IP address of the pod itself. If I keep scrolling, I'll see information on things like the memory request, the CPU request, and how much of that it's actually using. So again, real good deep dive information into the health of what's going on here. Now this query is actually, we can change that query as well. So I'm just going to, this is great to have a look at the running pods, right? But we know that we've got a problem. So I'm actually just going to change that to pending. If you can all see that, I'll zoom in there. So I've just changed that query to pending. And I'm going to hit search. And the beauty of this is it's really easy for you to slice and dice the data as you see fit. So now we've cut out all the pods that were in the running state and we're looking at the ones in pending. So again, just getting the information that you need and cutting out the information that you don't need to understand what's going on. And I'm going to change it further because we were looking at our client API that we know we've had problems with. So just going to put name like, and then let's look at our client API. Just wildcard the end there. Again, isolated it down to our client API, and we've got the information that we need. So really on the Kubernetes side of things, just to summarize, we've looked at how simple it is to deploy our agent. It's really, really quick and easy, and how the agent can dynamically on the fly instrument your applications with both APM and analytics. So making it super easy. But I think the real highlight was the dashboard, where we open up that lid of the black box and we show you that deep dive and see exactly what's going on in your Kubernetes environment in relation to your pods. Now, just to finish up on the demo, I just wanted to touch on another dashboard. So you may remember AD Financial from the main keynote earlier, and they're a big AWS user. So this dashboard here really is just showing you how even in an IaaS environment, we can still go deeper than the application. So pulling out stats here on the DynamoDB, the S3 buckets, and the EC2. So again, giving you that visibility that you really need to understand the whole kind of environment. So in summary, why AppDynamics for cloud monitoring? Well, AppDynamics is end-to-end. So we monitor from the front end right through to the back end, regardless of whether your application is hosted on-premise or across multiple clouds. And we do that through the magic of the business transaction, which is the consistent unit of measure, regardless of changes to your underlying infrastructure or architecture. AppDynamics gives you a full stack view. So we've seen today how we can go deeper than the application in environments like Kubernetes, Docker, in IaaS environments. And finally, AppDynamics is unified. And by unified, I mean we give you the technology health and metrics, the business health and metrics, and the customer experience health and metrics. So today's session has shown you how AppDynamics gives you the visibility that's essential in a cloud environment. So I'd like to thank you all for your time. And if there's any further questions, please grab myself or my colleagues outside at one of the demo booths. Thank you.